What's up, everybody? Welcome to the channel. My name is Mr. Hurricane, and this is my one and only 2017 NFL mock draft. This is a video that is requested every year as draft season approaches, and that's why I continue to post this every year. My mocks are never that good. I like talking about different logic behind various picks. I don't like constructing the mock draft all that much, and especially today now, the day of the draft, with all this, oh, maybe Mitchell Trubisky goes #1 overall now all of a sudden. So I don't want to think about the mock draft anymore, so that's why I'm recording it now and just going with what I have. So feel free to follow along here. It's going to be mostly just an audio podcast sort of deal, not really giving you a lot of visuals to work off of, but this is how the video tends to go. So the 2017 draft begins tonight in Philadelphia with the Cleveland Browns on the clock after a 1-15 season. The lead up to the draft has basically led with Myles Garrett being the consensus #1, the no-brainer selection, the pass rusher from Texas A&M. And today that's kind of been shaken up a little bit, with now Adam Schefter talking about that he has some sources saying that Mitchell Trubisky is now going to be the #1 overall selection, because the Browns are not sure they can get a deal to move up from number 12 overall to somewhere in the top 10 where they can then select Trubisky while still taking Garrett at #1. You can say best player available all you want, but if your team doesn't have a quarterback, you play by a different set of rules. So the Browns, if they do like Trubisky a lot, then they have to figure out the way they can get him. If they're not working out a deal with a team like Tennessee or the Jets or someone that wants to move down, while also gauging the interest of quarterback-hungry teams, like the 49ers, like the Chicago Bears potentially. Then there's also Deshaun Watson, who gets kind of tied into this a little bit, because when you see one quarterback go, sometimes that leads another team to be like, okay, we better go get our guy now. Quarterback runs are pretty common, and they're chaotic, and they're hard to predict sometimes. So my main question here is, I'm going to probably work pretty slowly with some of these picks. Bear with me here. I just want to talk a little bit about football. Sorry, I got to pass some time until the draft begins. But my question is, do the Browns think that Mitchell Trubisky is the quarterback they want to roll out this year or put a lot of stock into as the future of the franchise? In that case, an aggressive move has to be made, whether that's taking him at #1 or trading up from number 12. Now, they could get a deal done between now and the draft beginning. They did that a few years ago when they traded up to get Trent Richardson around an hour before the draft began. So, deals could still be working out here. I mean, a lot of teams play hardball until, you know, the rubber meets the road and you have to make a decision. So, there could easily be a trade in the works with, Tennessee, who probably wants to move down a good bit. And I think a good rule of thumb regarding just draft rumors is that the closer the draft gets, the thicker the smoke screen gets at the same time. I mean, these teams probably had their plans set a good bit ago, and now they're working the media and seeing how they can try to influence the draft in any way, whether that's elevating a player's stock, knocking a player's stock down, downplaying interest, hyping up interest. I mean, if the 49ers are sitting here saying they love Mitchell Trubisky, that's a good tactic to try to scare the Browns into taking him at #1, if that's your motive, and then taking Myles Garrett at #2. That'd be a great gift to end up with. One of my big problems here is that at some point, the 49ers have to get a starting quarterback, and I think the Bears are going to select a quarterback as well. They went and got Mike Glennon, but I think they could be a prime team to go and take a Brad Kaya on day 2. And I kind of like the idea of giving yourself 2 chances to get that quarterback position right. It's what the Seahawks did a few years ago with Russell Wilson. They go get Matt Flynn, select Russell Wilson in the 3rd round. Wilson beats him out in camp, and you know the rest from there. The reason why I'm diving so deep into this right now is because if the Browns don't take Trubisky at 1, then there's a huge mess in the top 10 with quarterback-needy teams, and the Browns trying to work their way up. So trying to sift through that mess to make some sense of it. I'll come back to Trubisky when we get there, but at #1 overall, I'm giving the Browns Myles Garrett. I'll stick with that. Now, I'm the first person to be excited about the prospects of Trubisky going #1 overall and starting the night off on a chaotic point. That'd be phenomenal. I love that. So I'm still going to give them Myles Garrett because I do ultimately think they'll get a deal done to work up. Whatever the cost is going to be, I think that they will pay it. They have a ton of draft capital right now, and if you come away with a premier pass rusher potentially in Myles Garrett and your hopeful quarterback of the future, that's a great way to begin, even if it costs you some of those second-round picks or that draft capital that you've built up. One thing that I do have a little bit of pause about with this is that they passed in the top picks last year to draft either Jared Goff or Carson Wentz. They traded out. To not take the quarterback again in the top 5, I think would just be a little bit interesting, but I'm going with Myles Garrett. It's done. So number 2, San Francisco. John Lynch, now the GM, and Kyle Shanahan, now the head coach. They have an opportunity now to take Mitchell Trubisky if they want him, but it hasn't appeared like that is going to be the case. I am really interested in what these teams are going to do at quarterback because they have to take somebody at some point. And I think this year you might have some unique competition for players like Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Kaiser from teams that may want a quarterback so they can groom them for a year from now or 2 years. Teams like Pittsburgh are teams to watch, New Orleans, the Arizona Cardinals. So it's tough to just slot in players and just say, yeah, no quarterback right now. It just doesn't seem right. This could be a really chaotic draft, and it begins whenever a quarterback is selected. But here in this case for San Francisco, I'm going to give them Jamal Adams. They should have a chance later then to trade up if they want a quarterback, or maybe there's a player later in the draft that they like. But I'll go with the safety right now, Jamal Adams, who can be a big difference maker for that secondary. And he's a fun player to watch. Every time I listen to people talk about him as well, they mention his leadership, which can be very big for a young team like San Francisco. So we'll see if the hard-hitting safety selects a hard-hitting safety from LSU. Garrett at 1, Adams at 2. Now on to Chicago, and I'm giving them Marshon Lattimore. Now, I see a lot of people mocking safeties here, which obviously safety I think is a need for them. And you wonder if and when they'll select a quarterback, but I'll go with Marshon Lattimore here as they play in a division against Aaron Rodgers, Matt Stafford, Sam Bradford, and all those teams have pretty good receivers as well. So you need to have a secondary to compete with them, and the Bears need to get some more turnovers this year. They have a lot of work to do on that defense. Maybe they'd love for Jamal Adams to be here, but in my mock he isn't. So I give them who many say is the top cornerback and would give them a much needed secondary boost. I should mention, by the way, I'm kind of doing this mock draft with predict the pick on NFL.com rules, where you get more points based on how close you are to hitting the player to the right pick. So if you're a pick or two off, that's alright. So sometimes I just want to keep a player in a certain range. I'm trying to maximize my points this year. So at number 4, to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think quarterback might be in play, but it just hasn't seemed like it. I did want to put O.J. Howard here, but I decided to go with Leonard Fournette instead. We all know how explosive Fournette can be as a runner. He's big, he's fast. A lot of people compare him to like Adrian Peterson. Now, we'll see what Fournette's effectiveness is in the passing game, and I think that he can be a lot more effective in the NFL when it comes to the passing game than Adrian Peterson has been. Fournette wasn't asked to do a whole lot of pass catching at LSU, so I'm guessing that a lot of teams that worked him out probably wanted to get a good look at this because it's becoming such a big priority in the NFL. And if you're a back that is a liability on third down, that's a real problem. And the running back market these last free agent seasons have proved that. There are certainly places in the NFL for that power runner that doesn't do a whole lot else, but teams don't tend to prioritize that, so looking at that trend and then taking Fournette at 4 is interesting, but a runner of Fournette's caliber can still grab the interest of a lot of teams that still like that power runner that can help change the offense a bit. Now with Fournette in Jacksonville, what that would do is that if Blake Bortles, assuming that he is the starting quarterback again this year, if he's not playing well, it gives you another avenue which to run the offense through. I could see a few different things going on here at 4, even O.J. Howard, maybe a quarterback, but I'll go Fournette for now. Now on to number 5, and this is where I think a trade is possible, And I'm going to put a player here that I'm not sure if he goes to Tennessee if they stay here, but I think he goes in this range. I'm going O.J. Howard. Now, I can make the argument of O.J. Howard going to Tennessee, which begins with the age of Delanie Walker and also the prospects of having O.J. Howard and Delanie Walker. Imagine two awesome receiving tight ends that can both block for a team that loves to ground and pound, this exotic smash mouth. Howard is a really special tight end. He's one of my favorite prospects in this class, and it seems almost dishonest to label him a tight end because most tight ends can't do what he does. He's his own breed. Howard, I think, is maybe the most likely player in this entire draft to have all-pro potential, and I'm hoping whatever team he ends up going to features him the way that he deserves to be. So on to number 6, and this is where I think another trade spot is likely. Now, I'm projecting a trade here. I'm saying the Browns trade up with the New York Jets, and this is where they select Mitchell Trubisky from North Carolina. The Browns have to get a quarterback, and if they want Trubisky, they're going to find a way to get him. They have the number 1 overall selection. They have plenty of capital to trade up. So I think a trade here is very possible. The Jets seem to want to move down. So I'll go Trubisky here to the Browns through the Jets. And that takes us on to number 7 with the now Los Angeles Chargers. And I love what they're doing with their defense. Joey Bosa was a huge difference maker for them, and I like to strengthen their secondary in this spot. I'm going to go with Malik Hooker from Ohio State. This gives them a safety with a ton of range and game-changing ability to create big turnovers. And that just adds to a secondary that was already pretty good with Jason Verrett, hope he stays healthy, and of course Casey Hayward, who had a big first year in, well, it was San Diego at the time. So from there it takes us to number 8, the Carolina Panthers. Been seeing a lot of running backs mocked here, and I just have not been able to buy into that for a while. Yes, you can make arguments about Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey, but just seeing the trends of what they end up drafting. I mean, they had K'Wan Short and Starla Tulele and go and draft Vernon Butler last year. When they wanted the receiver, they go get a big receiver like Kelvin Benjamin. Then they go take a Devin Funchess. I think here they love a player like O.J. Howard, maybe even Fournette if he's on the board, maybe McCaffrey, but I think you can wait on running back perhaps. This team seems to be built around a reoccurring theme of physicality, and especially in the trenches. So I'm going to go with Solomon Thomas from Stanford here to give them a pass rusher, one they desperately need. They don't have that dominant edge rusher anymore. They do have now Julius Peppers back in Carolina along with Charles Johnson, but both are pretty up there in age. So getting a young pass rusher is a big need for them and one they can fit here with Thomas. Next up at number 9, we have the Cincinnati Bengals, and I wonder if they could be a team that is looking to trade down. I could see them going after a receiver early on in this draft. I could see them trying to address their offensive line, but here at number 9, I want to go with Jonathan Allen from Alabama. This is a good value for Allen, and in these mocks, I mean, somebody has to fall, and in this case, it's Jonathan Allen. You can move him around the defensive line, and I just don't see a team like the Bengals in that AFC North passing on him if he's available. Rounding out the top 10, we have the Buffalo Bills with a new head coach in Sean McDermott. They have a couple needs here at cornerback and wide receiver, and I think you could pencil in a player like Marlon Humphrey here or Mike Williams. In my case, I'm going to go Mike Williams, pair him up with Sammy Watkins, and say, Tyrod Taylor, now we have you a receiving core. Let's see what you can do now. One thing that I want to point out here is that with McDermott in Carolina, they didn't really spend all these high picks on corners. Yes, they had Josh Norman, and he was, what, a 5th round pick a number of years ago? Last year, they selected a bunch of mid-round corners. I wonder if they'll just trust that McDermott can develop cornerbacks, and maybe they address this a little bit later, and just not in the first round. Meanwhile, you take Mike Williams here. We saw what he could do in the national championship game. It gives you a nice boost to the offense, and one this team definitely needed. And then if you have Watkins, Williams, McCoy, and Tyrod Taylor, you also have a chance. And that's what the Buffalo Bills need in 2017. Next up at number 11, the first selection for the New Orleans Saints. And they get pretty fortunate here for a good cornerback like Marlon Humphrey to still be available. There are a lot of good corners in this class though, so they could go in a different direction if they needed to. But with secondary needs like they have, I don't think there's a good reason to pass on a player of Humphrey's caliber. So Marlon Humphrey from Alabama to the Saints makes a lot of sense in this spot. So does insert your favorite pass rusher here. I mean, it's a deep cornerback class and a deep edge rusher class. But I'm going with Humphrey in this spot. Next up, we have number 12, and this is where I had the Browns trading with the Jets. And right here, I'm going to put Deshaun Watson. I just don't see Watson going into the teens or the 20s. I believe that somebody is going to believe enough in Deshaun Watson to take him earlier, and maybe it's the Jets here at number 12. Let's say they prefer Deshaun Watson, they trade with Cleveland, move down, get some picks that they can help build around Deshaun Watson. Now, I haven't really seen anything linking them to Watson, but, I mean, it's a team that needs a quarterback and he's got to go somewhere, and there's no way I'm just going to sit here and let Watson go to the Texans at 25. I just can't let that happen. So I think it's maybe likely he goes in the top 10 to some team, but right here fits. On to 13 now, Arizona. A lot of people plugging in Patrick Mahomes here or a quarterback. I don't want to do that. They definitely need a quarterback to work with for the future, but also, I think they're a team that wants to squeeze out one more year of a window. 2 years ago, we saw what they could do, and a lot of that team is still around. They got Chandler Jones in the fold now. They have a lot of really good pieces on this team. So I'm going to strengthen their offense, but not at quarterback. We're going to go with Corey Davis at wide receiver. Larry Fitzgerald will eventually retire. And outside of him, I mean, you got some speed. John Brown, of course. But Michael Floyd's no longer here. Let's get Corey Davis in here. Many think he is the #1 receiver in this class. He was very productive at Western Michigan. Good hands, good route runner. He's very competitive in the red zone. And I think it's a perfect fit here. And if they take a quarterback here, I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me because they're a team that when Palmer plays well, they have a chance. If you don't believe in Palmer, then don't have him on your team then. I don't want to put Mahomes here or something because he's not going to play this year most likely. Receiver here makes sense to me. Next up, what do we have? The host of the draft. Okay, Philadelphia. We're going to go with running back Christian McCaffrey. I don't want him to fall any further. And if he's available here, it makes a lot of sense as well. McCaffrey is one of my favorite players in this class because I love pass-catching backs and ones that can run routes and do more than just catch your dump off and pick up a few yards. Like, be a functional receiver like Le'Veon Bell or David Johnson, who was one of my favorite running backs a couple years ago. Did not think that he would immediately become such a star, but that mold of running back, while McCaffrey is not as big as those guys and not the power runner, still going to be a player you can hand the ball off to plenty times a game and then throw 5-6 passes a game to and even line him up at receiver. Just get him in space against a safety or a linebacker and trust that his receiving ability is going to win. So on to 15 now, we have the Indianapolis Colts, and it seems like a reoccurring trend. Let's get some defense here. I could see it being a pass rusher or maybe something else on the defensive side of the football. But I'm going to go with Reuben Foster here, another Alabama Crimson Tide defender. Foster did have the diluted sample at the combine, so there are concerns about his stock falling. Same with Jabril Peppers. But I think Foster here to a team like Indy just makes too much sense. Insane range at linebacker, brings a physical presence, and he's the exact kind of player that a team like Indianapolis needs. There are a lot more edge rushers in this class, so Indianapolis can still address that even in the second round with a good talented player and get a big boost to their defense if they do a package deal like this. Almost halfway through, number 16, the Baltimore Ravens. And we're going to keep it on the defensive side here. Baltimore, it's synonymous with defense. And we're going to give them Hassan Reddick. I believe they could be in play for a receiver if Davis or Williams are on the board, but in this case, of course, they are not. Now, Reddick is a really fun defender. He's my kind of defender in this new style NFL we're seeing with these athletic linebackers that can run and chase, offer a little bit of pass rush. So I think you can use a player like Reddick in some different roles depending on, your personnel packages. But imagine having a player like CJ Mosley and a player like Hassan Reddick in your nickel defense. You can do a lot with those players. We're going to go to 17 now, to the Washington Redskins. And we're going to go with another running back in this spot. Now, the third off the board, we'll give them Dalvin Cook. This would give them an every down back that can give you some explosive ability out of the backfield. They do have Robert Kelly there. Maybe there's still a role for him in this offense. And I think this is about the range where even if it's not Washington, I think he goes around this area of the first round. On to number 18, Tennessee on the clock again, and I already gave them O.J. Howard earlier, although it was like a potential trade spot. But regardless, let's have some fun here with the Tennessee Titans. John Ross, wide receiver, who ran a 4.22 record-setting 40-yard dash at the NFL Combine. Sure, I already gave them O.J. Howard, and I think a good combination would be pass catcher plus cornerback. But maybe, I'm kind of playing the points game here, maybe they do something else early on, but still want to get a player like John Ross. Imagine a team like them that loves to run the football the way that they do. They have a quarterback like Marcus Mariota, and then you have John Ross that can stretch the field. That's going to be a nightmare in that AFC South. So I think Ross to Tennessee would be a lot of fun, as would O.J. Howard to Tennessee, perhaps even both. Unlikely though. On to 19. Been seeing a lot of stuff about Dalvin Cook to Tampa Bay, but in this case he's not available, but I still would like to upgrade their offense a bit. It's a good tight end class. Let's go with David Njoku from Miami. Seeing the way the offense could transform with a player like Deshaun Jackson now there, and then David Njoku would be pretty enticing. He is an athletic tight end with plenty of speed that you can move around. Maybe not going to be the guy that you keep in to block, but you're going to have another receiving option here for Jameis Winston, and you'll look to have an offense that can compete with the likes of the Atlanta Falcons in that exciting NFC South. That takes us to number 20 with the Denver Broncos, and they have to get some help for their offensive line, especially when you play in that division. So we're going to go to the offensive line finally, and it seems that the top-ranked tackle for most has been Garrett Bowles. So we're going to give Garrett Bowles here to Denver as they try to get some offensive line stability while they try to figure out their quarterback situation between Paxton Lynch now entering his second year and then Trevor Siemian. So finally an O-lineman taking us to 21 with the Detroit Lions. I have them going with a pass rusher. We're going with Charles Harris here. And I think that the pass rushers can go in a variety of different orders depending on who your preference is. But after Myles Garrett, I think it gets kind of tough to put these pass rushers in the right order. But I'll go with Charles Harris here to Detroit to a team up then with Ezekiel Ansah. And I think they could also be on the look for a cornerback, but can still address that perhaps later. We'll go with pass rusher now, and along with pick 22, the Miami Dolphins, as I have them selecting Derek Barnett from Tennessee. I think this year they're going to go and try to find that pass rusher to learn from and eventually take over for Cameron Wake. And we'll see if Barnett is available here or if he is the pick, but I do think they'll take a pass rusher early. On to 23 now. And the New York Giants were a much improved football team last year, but they could still use some offensive line help. I have them addressing that here with Cam Robinson from Alabama, who used to be one of the highest ranked players in a lot of these mock drafts, but a lot has changed. This could be a strange draft for offensive linemen overall because it's not regarded as a very deep offensive line class. And I think we've gotten used to seeing so many linemen go early, and now we're not going to hear any for probably a couple hours during the draft. So on the 24 now, the Oakland Raiders, they are good on the offensive line. Let's go to defense. Jared Davis from Florida. They could use a force like him in the middle of that defense, and he's also a good athlete. So I think that Davis here makes a lot of sense, and I look at their linebackers and don't see a lot outside of Bruce Irvin that I'm all excited about. So I like Davis here to Oakland, and at 25 now, the Houston Texans. I wonder if they want to trade up and go aggressive after a quarterback if there is one that they like. Although to move up from 25 would not be cheap at all. If they do sit back at 25, I'm still going to give them a quarterback. Now we're going to go with Patrick Mahomes. And I like Patrick Mahomes a lot. He's a fun player to watch. Of course, gunslingers tend to be. They throw a lot of big passes, a lot of interceptions. There's never a dull moment with them. Now, Mahomes could use another year to perhaps sit on the bench and learn, but I think that regardless, the Texans have to go out and find a quarterback, and if it's not Watson and not Trubisky, then it's got to be somebody, and probably pretty early in this draft. They have Tom Savage on the roster. Maybe it's a Tom Savage versus a rookie type of competition, but I think regardless in this range, probably a good spot for Mahomes to go off the board. Number 26 now, the Seattle Seahawks. And they need some offensive line help, and they got a player here to take. Forrest Lamp. He played tackle for Western Kentucky and will probably play guard in the NFL. The Seahawks need to start really getting serious about addressing this offensive line and protecting their investment in Russell Wilson, and Lamp would be a big help towards getting that fixed. Wouldn't fix everything, but it's a necessary step. On the 27, the Kansas City Chiefs. I have them addressing their secondary with this pick, and cornerback from LSU, Tre'Davious White. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do with this selection here, but I wanted to address defense somewhere, and there are just a lot of good cornerbacks available in this range. I wanted Kansas City to have a chance to go get one to pair up with Marcus Peters. I'm also giving a cornerback to the Cowboys at 28. Chidobe Awuzie from Colorado, another cornerback off the board. I could also see it being a player maybe like Kevin King or another cornerback in this spot, but I go with Awuzie here, taking us to 29 in the Green Bay Packers, where I think they'll try to invest in their pass rush a bit here, and I have Takk McKinley coming off the board to them from UCLA. They took Kenny Clark from the UCLA defense last year in the first round, and I have him going back to that same spot with Takk McKinley. Now, they have Nick Perry on the team along with Clay Matthews, but it's good to have some pass rush depth there and some insurance in case Nick Perry does not have the same kind of season he did last year, which was his breakout campaign with 11 sacks in his 5th season. That takes us to number 30. We had the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I want to go defense here again with them, not quarterback, even though maybe they're in play looking for the successor to Big Ben. But we're going to go with another pass rusher here, a run, with Jordan Willis from Kansas State. They also have to find a way to replace an aging pass rusher in James Harrison, who's still fun to watch, but eventually they'll have to find his replacement, and this is a good draft to go and try doing that. Same situation as like the Dolphins have with Cameron Wake. So I have them taking Willis, and at 31, another defensive end here, I have Taco Charlton to the Atlanta Falcons. I like Vic Beasley in that defense a lot, and I think they'll add another defender to try and improve that defensive line. Taking us to number 32 overall, where the Saints traded away Brandon Cooks to acquire the number 32 overall selection, and some think that the Saints could go out and select a quarterback here in the first round. I instead wonder if another team wants this selection to take a quarterback and get that 5th-year option that is oh so valuable at the quarterback position. So whether it's the Saints or a team trading up here, at 32 overall, I have DeShone Kizer going off the board, the 4th quarterback of the first round. So this could be a number of different teams at 32 that could want Kizer, maybe even New Orleans. I wouldn't think they'd take a quarterback a week after signing Adrian Peterson, because to me it seems like they want to try making a run for it now. But who knows? The quarterbacks are so tough to predict in this class because we think Trubisky's going to be a Brown, but how does he end up becoming a Cleveland Brown? And from there, it doesn't get any easier. So that is my first round mock draft for this year, now including a bonus selection. Number 48 overall, my favorite team, the Minnesota Vikings, will be making their first pick unless Rick Spielman decides to trade up. But I have my 48th overall selection for you guys here, and the Vikings offensive line was obviously very, very bad. They already went and signed Riley Reiff and Mike Remmers to big contracts, and I think their first pick in the draft is going to be another offensive lineman. So I have them selecting Pat Elflein from Ohio State, who can play corner corner. He can play center. He can play guard. It gives them flexibility whether they want to have Elfline play center and kick out Berger to guard, or just have Elfline play guard until he can take over at center. So that is my 2017 mock draft. Thank you all for watching or listening to this video. I hope that you had a good time and passed a few minutes here before the draft begins. That is it for today, and I will see you all next time. Have a great day.